I've got this 110 scale Ford Bronco looking pretty good if I say so myself. Nothing fancy here, just an older low buck build with a little bit of simple DIY creativity to help enhance the scale realism. Here's everything there is to know about this rig. Hello everyone and welcome! Amongst all the custom builds and CAD modeling I've got going on, which I'm investing more of my time into than I'd probably like to admit, it's always nice to break things up with some simple projects as well. Today I've got this 110 scale 73 Ford Bronco back on the bench. This is a truck that I've had for quite a while and has made some prior appearances on the channel, although it's probably been several years by this point. Not at all a bad looking Bronco, and it's certainly been a lot of fun to drive. Obviously though, I can take the scale realism up a notch, and that's exactly what I want to do today. While the truck works perfectly, and as you can see I've already got the body painted, complete with a custom hinged body mount and some inner fenders, I want to essentially finish this truck up by adding lights, an interior, and a few final details here and there. Nothing fancy, too involved, or expensive here. I just want to spend a couple of evenings elevating the appearance of this rig, as I think a little bit of work is going to go a long way towards making this truck look more lifelike. I've also gotten quite a few questions as I've been posting some updates on our social media pages, so hopefully this video will help answer any questions you might have, but as always, if any questions remain, please feel free to put them below in the comments. Without any further introductions though, let's dive right in. Ford's over 100-year legacy has introduced many iconic nameplates. The Model T, Mustang, and F-Series pickups probably rank at the top, but certainly the Bronco is up there as well. Introduced for the 1966 model year, the Bronco was a relatively compact off-road capable 4x4 initially designed to compete primarily with the Jeep CJ5 and International Scout. Although more stylish trims such as the Sport and later Ranger were available, the first generation Bronco, which ceased production in 1977, was really more focused on utility and value. All the glass was flat, the bumpers were straight, and some of the sheet metal, such as the door skins, were identical left to right, prior to all of the hardware being installed. Few comfort or luxury options were available from the factory, especially in the beginning, with the focus instead going towards the drivetrain and chassis, with all first-gen Broncos being four-wheel drive and featuring durable body-on-frame construction. Ford's 302 cubic inch small block V8 was optional, paired to a 3-speed manual transmission, with an automatic being optional starting in 1973. Over the course of the first generation, several different body styles were available, including a wagon, pickup, and roadster. The 92-inch wheelbase platform of the first-gen Bronco was unique, in contrast to later generations which would be built on a shortened F-Series chassis, with much of the front-end sheet metal and overall styling shared with that of the F-Series pickups. While sales for the Bronco were initially strong, competition from other manufacturers, such as Chevrolet's Blazer, would absorb much of the market, with major selling points including more cargo room and superior handling on paved roads. With more and more 4x4s and SUVs winding up not on ranches or desolate trails, but rather suburban streets and shopping malls, the shift in the market from the 1960s to the 90s is reflected in the evolution of the Bronco, with the name being axed entirely after the 1996 model year. The Bronco name would return for the 2021 model year, both as a 2-door and 4-door midsize SUV, once again marketed more as an off-road capable 4x4 designed to compete with the Jeep Wrangler. Much like in the 80s with the smaller Bronco 2, a compact crossover SUV called the Bronco Sport was also introduced, sharing many similar styling elements with its larger and more rugged body-on-frame counterpart. Rather than more or less being a derivative of the Ford F-Series pickup, its styling is all its own, and clearly references many styling elements from the first generation. Since its reintroduction, well over 350,000 Broncos have left the very same plant the original was assembled in, clearly a successful and I think stylish return of an iconic vehicle. Still though, despite the modern design and impressive performance of today's models, along with the practical, if you can't beat them, join them mentality of the models from the late 70s to the 90s, which do account for some of the best sales numbers, in my opinion, you just can't beat the first-gen Broncos. The simplicity, the style, I think it's just an iconic look. This body here is from Tamiya, which I've custom painted both on the inside and certain sections of the outside. I was sort of going for a modern resto mod style look, and blemishes aside, I think it turned out looking pretty nice. It's a polycarbonate body, not a hard body, but it's got some good detail, and I think painting some elements from the outside, such as matte black around the wheel arches, helps elevate the appearance, along with choosing to paint certain details instead of using the included decals. Although that said, in typical Tamiya fashion, a great selection of decals are included. If you do choose to paint the outside of the body, it's a good idea to paint either the same color or a similar color on the inside too, using paint specifically designed for polycarbonate bodies. That way, if the paint on the outside gets scratched off, it's not as noticeable. You can also get more creative if you want by painting the inside of the body to look like rusty metal and then paint the outside body color. When the body gets scratched, it'll show what looks like rust and steel underneath. Now keep in mind this Tamiya Bronco body is designed to fit chassis like the CC01 and CC02, so in comparison to some other popular quote-unquote 1/10 scale RC platforms, it looks relatively small and will require a much shorter wheelbase chassis. The first-gen Broncos were not very large vehicles, and mathematically speaking the dimensions of this body here are actually pretty close to being a true 1/10 scale representation of the real thing. Unfortunately for many RC manufacturers, the scale shown on the box is often more about marketing than it is a true representation of the mathematical scale of the vehicle. Just something important to be aware of if you want to do a custom build with this particular body. There are obviously chassis out there that will fit it, and I'll be talking more about this MST CMX that I'm using a bit later, but if you want to do a Bronco build with a platform like an SCX10, Proline does offer an early Bronco body that will fit a more popular 12-inch wheelbase. The thing I don't like as much about the Proline Bronco body is that to me it looks a bit too long and low relative to how a real one looks. Obviously they had to stretch it a bit to fit a 12-inch wheelbase chassis, so as a result some compromises had to be made, but in my opinion if you want something that proportionally looks a bit more correct and is closer to being a true 1/10 scale representation of the real thing, the Tamiya body is the way to go. In addition to the body itself, I've gradually added a few custom designed and 3D printed accessories. Up front is an SLA 3D printed grille. Again, I wanted to go with sort of a resto mod theme with this project, so I'm really happy with how this piece turned out. Obviously not that different from how a factory grille would look, but it's got a few little custom touches here and there that I think look pretty cool, but I definitely still want to add some functional LEDs into the headlights. In the back there's a custom 3D printed jerry can, and looking underneath there are some inner fender and tailpipe pieces. These parts were a big upgrade, as now you can't just see right through the whole body from down low, but clearly I needed to do something similar up top, as you can see the inside of the body and the chassis below when looking through the windows. This Bronco desperately needs some sort of interior, even if it's not very deep or detailed, so that's definitely something on the agenda for today. Before diving too deep into the upgrades though, I do want to talk quickly about the chassis that I'm using. This here is an MST CMX, which as far as I can tell is still readily available, although if I had to guess, this platform is probably about 10 years old at this point. It's a pretty basic setup with a mid-mounted motor, servo on axle, and 4-link suspension front and rear, though it is a great platform if you want to use a smaller sized 1/10 scale body. I assume any body that would fit a Tamiya CC01 or CC02 would also fit the CMX, as the width is about 195mm and you can adjust the wheelbase. It seems like a pretty solid and simple platform, although admittedly I haven't driven it a whole lot in recent years. Obviously not the most scale-looking chassis on the market, but it was a very reasonably priced kit that was fun and simple to put together. It seems well designed and quite durable. MST is probably best known for their on-road drift chassis, but I think they did a great job with this off-road platform as well. I like the stance and proportions relative to the body. It's fairly capable all things considered, though keep in mind, again this chassis is quite a bit smaller than your typical SCX10 for example, so that will limit what this truck can do. Those differential housings are also quite large and not the most scale looking by today's standards. It is quite maneuverable thanks to its smaller size, good steering angle, and shorter wheelbase, but those differential housings can get caught up on stuff if you're not careful. These are 1/9 wheels, which I think proportionally look pretty good with this body, big enough to get over some obstacles, but not too large to where they look out of place. Overall, I think it's a good blend of scale realism and off-road performance. As mentioned, I am using some custom magnetic body mounts, so there's no need to drill any holes in the body to mount it. I'm not really sure how relevant this platform still is in 2025, but if you want to do a build using one of these nice looking Tamiya CC01 or CC02 bodies, but don't want to use either one of those chassis, this seems like a good way to go. I'm pretty sure MST does have a variation of this chassis with a front-mounted motor, which could potentially leave more room for an interior. Obviously, with that mid-mounted motor and a standard-sized battery creeping in from the front, a full-depth interior isn't exactly going to be doable, but there's certainly some room for improvement here, so let's see if I can work a bit of magic and elevate the appearance of this '73 Bronco. Now, I'm not going for perfection here. This project doesn't need to be my magnum opus. I'm just wanting to make this truck look more complete and elevate the appearance as best I can without investing a tremendous amount of time. Right now, I think what's really detracting from the lifelike appearance of this rig is the lack of an interior, with the inside of the body and the chassis below being fully visible through the windows. Not a very good look, but fortunately it'll be an easy fix. A while back I did a 3D scan of a Tamiya Bronco body, so designing an interior piece to fit was extremely easy having this mesh to work from. As I've talked about and showcased during some prior projects on this channel, 3D scanners can be a great tool if you do a lot of custom RC projects with a lot of 3D printed components that need to be designed to fit pre-existing objects. With this digital body to work from, I can ensure that the interior piece will be a good fit before I even start 3D printing, both saving time and preventing waste from having to produce multiple prototypes. Unfortunately though, as I was just talking about, due to the location of the battery and the rest of the chassis below, there isn't a tremendous amount of room for an interior, at least not one that goes very deep. Some RC platforms are going to be much better than others when it comes to adding an interior, but honestly just gluing in a flat piece of styrene painted black would be better than what I've got currently, so anything I'm able to do is an improvement. As you can see, this piece isn't very deep, but I did go ahead and add a roll cage as well as some seats and a driver. I'm just reusing 3D models that I already have, which I've designed for prior projects. I wanted to have a driver figure, but the only model that I have currently is this race driver. It looks pretty cool, but maybe a little bit out of place in this Bronco. I could definitely see myself changing that out at some point in the future with a driver figure that's not wearing a helmet, but for now I guess it's better than no driver at all. We'll just say this guy wants to be extra safe out on the trails. With these very simple 3D models complete, I sent the files over to the printers to bring them to life. The interior piece is relatively large, but it fit just fine onto the build platform of my Tevo Tornado. The driver and seat look pretty good, but I didn't quite have the settings dialed in for this gray interior piece, as there's obviously a few flaws with the roll cage. It looks like some more support material was needed, but no worries, no need to throw this piece out, it just needs a little work. I cleaned it up with a knife and some sanding, and I re-glued the sections of the roll cage that needed it using a mixture of super glue and baking soda. It doesn't need to look perfect, and this area isn't even going to be that noticeable on the finished truck, so it's good to go. After masking off the helmet, which I wanted to remain white, I sprayed these parts with some flat black paint. While those parts were drying, I worked on adding functional LEDs to the headlights and taillights. I rummaged through my electronics bin and located some bright white and red 5mm LEDs, along with a couple of resistors and wires. I won't be installing any sort of light kit. All that I'll be doing is connecting these LEDs to the power cables going into the ESC, so anytime they're plugged in, the lights will remain on. No turn signals or functional brake lights with this setup, but it's simple and should look pretty nice. After getting everything soldered together and ensuring it all works, I decided to use the parts included with the body to mount these LEDs. A few modifications were required, particularly to the headlight buckets since I'm not using the stock grille included with the body, but eventually I got everything secured and it'll be ready to go in after the interior is installed. Speaking of the interior, the paint at this point was now dry, but I wasn't finished with 3D printing just yet. I decided to try and cover up the fact that this interior is so shallow by putting in a bunch of junk in the back, similar to what I did with that 1980 Dodge Ram Charger. In fact, these are the exact same 3D models that I used for that project. I just enlarged them to be 1/10 scale and 3D printed them in this larger size. I'm not sure if I'll be fooling anyone, but it should look pretty cool. Of course, after these parts were printed, I needed to apply some paint. Once the spray painting was complete, I added some additional details with a brush. In addition to those 3D printed accessories, I went around the shop and found some other random junk that I could glue to the interior, and here's how it looks. Obviously, I've got a wheel wrench, body clip, and some other RC odds and ends. Some red ribbon rolled up and then glued together, looks kind of like a toe strap, and a roll of felt with a couple of zip ties, looks like some camping gear. Satisfied with this collection of random junk to add to the back of this Bronco, I glued everything into place. Not the most detailed interior I've ever built, but it's something to look at, and hey, the price was right. I secured this interior to the body using Velcro. That way it would be securely mounted into place while still being easily removable. What an improvement, no longer being able to see right through to the chassis below. Next, I secured all of the LEDs into place, making sure to tape all of the wires to the underside of the body so they don't get in the way. In hindsight, I guess I could have lined up that left rear taillight a little better, but aside from that, they look great. While for older vehicles, I generally prefer the warm-toned headlights, I think these more bluish, bright white LEDs look great on this rig, being that it's more of a custom resto mod style build. I went ahead and added panel lines using a Parma pen. Obviously, these aren't going to be the cleanest lines when you're just doing them by hand, but it's a simple process, and overall, I'm happy with how they turned out. Especially when you look at them from a bit of distance, they're pretty convincing. There were just a few final details I thought I'd quickly add, the first being a set of windshield wipers. Rather than using the included 2D decals, I decided to get a few measurements, then design and 3D print a set. And finally, with this Bronco now being roadworthy, I went ahead and installed a license plate. What a difference just a few simple items can make. At this point, I think I can pretty much consider this Bronco finished. I might add some additional details at some point in the future, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. Just those few additional items has really elevated the overall appearance of this rig, with the interior especially making this truck look a lot more complete. Like I said before, I think it's sort of a good blend of a trail truck and a mild crawler. While in general, I do prefer the look of a hard body, when you do some detail painting and add some accessories to a polycarbonate body like this, you can get it looking pretty good, and what I've done here certainly isn't even close to the limit of what can be done. On the positive side, the lighter weight of this body will help improve the performance and reduce the likeliness of this truck tipping over. Although I have managed to roll this truck over on a few occasions already, and that was without the interior installed. Overall though, a cool little rig, and I'm happy to see it in a more completed state, and of course I'm excited to get this thing out onto the trails. As much as I would love to conclude this video with some driving footage, I haven't yet had a chance to get this thing out in its current state to film some nice driving shots. This is sort of the off season here for us in Ohio, but it won't be long before I'll be getting back out there and putting this rig to the test. But bit by bit, I've gradually improved the appearance of this truck, and I hope it's inspired some of you all to do the same. While I'm not sure how relevant some of these 3D models will be to anyone building a truck other than this exact same Tamiya Bronco, I have posted the STL files onto our Patreon for anyone who's interested. Of course, we also have a variety of other chassis and accessories over there as well, and I really appreciate everyone's continued support, as that's what helps make these videos possible. A huge thanks to all of our patrons, and of course all of you viewers as well. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and you'll stay tuned to see what's next. That's all I've got for you today though. Thanks again everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.